Welcome everyone, I'm Ellen and today we have a 100 question quiz on the 1950s. At the end, please share your score with us and let's begin. What record label did Sam Phillips establish in Memphis on March 27th, 1952? Phillips Records, Sun Records, or Columbia Records? Sun Records. On July 8, 1953, Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips played which song on his show to introduce Elvis Presley to his listeners? Hound Dog, Blue Suede Shoes, or That's All Right? That's All Right. Before Ernest Hemingway received the Nobel Prize in Literature for The Old Man and the Sea in 1954, which award did he receive before that? Pulitzer Prize, Marcel Duchamp Prize, or Future Generation Art Prize? The Pulitzer Prize. The first nuclear submarine was launched on January 21st, 1954. What was its name? Han class, Leninsky Komsomo, or the USS Nautilus? The USS Nautilus. The novel Old Yeller received a Newbery Honor in 1957. Who was the author? Vladimir Nabokov, Fred Gibson, or Ralph Ellison? Fred Gibson. What television broadcast did CBS debut on October 4th, 1957? I Love Lucy, Father Knows Best, or Leave It to Beaver? Leave It to Beaver. On June 29, 1958, Brazil won its first FIFA World Cup with a score of 5-2. Who lost the final match? Sweden, England, or Spain? Sweden. Who hosted the original Twilight Zone? Rodman Edward Serling, Robin Ward, or Forrest Whitaker? Rodman Edward Serling. What was the population in the United States by April 1st, 1950? About 94 million, 151 million, or just shy of 324 million? Just over 151 million. Which city in the United States had the second largest population? Chicago, New York, or Philadelphia? Chicago. The average price for a gallon of gasoline was 18 cents at the start of the 50s. What was it by the end of the decade? 25 cents, 32 cents, or $1.90? 25 cents. When did Alaska become the 49th state of America? The start of the decade, the middle of the decade, or the end of the decade? The end of the decade. In how many of the 10 MLB World Series of the 50s did the New York Yankees win? 6, 8, or 10? 6. What makes Disneyland in Anaheim, California so special? It is the second oldest Disney resort. 700 million people have visited it, or it's the only Disney park Walt Disney saw completed. It's the only Disney park Walt Disney saw completed. In 1957, Dr. Seuss's landmark book was published. What was its title? The Lorax, The Cat in the Hat, or Green Eggs and Ham? Green Eggs and Ham. The average annual salary was $5,000 by 1959. What was the average annual salary in 1950? About $3,200, $3,600, or $4,000? $3,210. The Minneapolis Lakers played in 5 of the 10 NBA finals during the 50s. How many did they win? None, 3, or 4? 4. What did the 22nd Amendment ratify on February 27, 1951 establish? Persons over the age of 18 can vote, the Clean Air Act, or the presidents became limited to 2 terms? Presidents became limited to a maximum of 2 terms. The Federal Aid Highway Act was signed in June of 1956 to create how many miles of national highways? 41,000, 111,000, or 181,000 miles? 41,000 miles. In 1957 was the peak of the baby boom. How many babies were born in America? 2 million, 4.3 million, or 7.84 million? 4.3 million. What dog breed was the most favored in the 1950s? Doberman, Beagle, or Labrador? The Beagle. Who introduced the famous home office desk in 1954? Haywood Wakefield, IKEA, or Castlereagh? Haywood Wakefield. In the 1950s, who got hitched to perform a Dolores Mohawk? Ike Turner, Sam Cooke, or Ray Charles? Sam Cooke. In the Batman TV series, which singer played Catwoman? Eartha Kitt, Jane Mansfield, or Jane Russell? Eartha Kitt. Which celebrity of the 1950s got the nickname the Big O? Marlon Brando, Ozzy Osbourne, or Roy Orbison? Roy Orbison. Sam Cooke is known as the king of what? Jazz, soul, or blues? Soul. Which 1950s star's real name was Jasper Cini? Al Pacino, Al Martino, or Alan Ritchson? Al Martino. Who is Walden Robert Casado better known as? Bob Dylan, Bobby Darin, or Bobby Brazier? Bobby Darin. Whose breakthrough record was Mambo Boogie? Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, or Johnny Otis? Johnny Otis. Who had a #1 hit with the Shrine of St. Cecilia? The Harptones, Vaughn Monroe, or Carol Loveday? The Harptones. What year were the first Grammy Awards held? 1950, 1955, or 1959? 1959. Carlo Mastrangelo played in which 1950s band? The Belmonts, the Everly Brothers, or the Monkees? The Belmonts. Which actor's given surname at birth was Lo Vecchio? Marilyn Monroe, Frankie Lane, or Dean Martin? Frankie Lane. Which musical group started out as the Silvertones? The Coasters, the Cleftones, or the Clovers? The Cleftones. Cry, Cry, Cry was a 50s hit by whom? Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, or Billie Holiday? Johnny Cash. Which of Ruth Brown's hits became #1 on the charts in 1950? As Long as I'm Moving, Teardrops from My Eyes, or 5, 10, 15 Hours? Teardrops from My Eyes. Stagger Lee was a #1 hit for which? Lloyd Price, Benny King, or Mississippi John Hurt? Lloyd Price. Which 1950s band featured Tony Williams as the lead tenor? The Platters, the Flamingos, or the Diamonds? The Platters. Which instrument did Les Paul pioneer in the 1950s? Violin, piano, or guitar? The guitar, that's Les Paul. Excuse me. Of which group was Terry Buzzy Johnson a member of? The Flamingos, the Diamonds, or the Crows? The Flamingos. What was Chuck Willis's first name? Henry, Hugh, or Harold? Harold. Which of the following was not invented in the 1950s? Barcode, Velcro, or near field communication? The barcode. Libya claimed independence in 1951 after being ruled over 40 years by which country? The USSR, Britain, or Italy? Italy. Which instrument was famously played by Fats Domino? Piano, drums, or guitar? The piano. Which landmark in nuclear weapons did the United States achieve in 1952? Discovery of unstable nucleus in plutonium, the first successful detonation of a hydrogen bomb, or the first nuclear power plant in the US started operations? The first successful detonation of a hydrogen bomb. What was the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya's motive? They did not want a military government regime in an effort to end British rule or to overthrow the government. In an effort to end British rule. Which of these countries was declared a self-governing Commonwealth of the United States in 1952? Costa Rica, Panama, or Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico. Which model was famously introduced by Ford in the year 1950? The Tudor, the Mustang, or Tin Lizzie? The Tudor. Who released the album Songs Our Daddy Taught Us in the 1950s? Bill Haley and the Comets, the Everly Brothers, or Danny and the Juniors? The Everly Brothers. The first issue of Mad magazine was published in 1952. What was the theme of the magazine? Comedy, statistics and news, or reality? Comedy. And bonus question, the average new car cost in 1950 was around $1,500 and has increased to about $46,000 by 2021. How much did the 1958 Chevrolet Corvette exotic car sell when it debuted? Over 2,000, over 3,000, or over 5,000? $3,631. About how much would you pay for a square dancing cotton check dress in the 1950s? 29 cents, $1.99, or $3.29? $3.29. Who created the oral polio vaccine to replace the Salk vaccine? Donald Effler, Albert Sabin, or William Kolff? Albert Sabin. What was Bill Haley's backing group called? The Crowns, the Comets, or the Crows? The Comets. Sputnik 1 was successfully launched by the USSR in 1957. When did they launch Sputnik 2? 1950, 1958, or only 30 years later? 1958. What was the result of Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands and West Germany signing the Treaty of Rome? Military intervention from the United States, forming of the European Economic Community, or economic disaster across Europe? The forming of the European Economic Community. Which country, along with Ghana, gained independence from the United Kingdom in 1957? Malaysia, Madagascar, or Mozambique? Malaysia. What is the significance of the Soviet Union's Luna 2 spacecraft, first man-made object to successfully land on the moon, first man-made object to touch the surface of the moon, or the first rocket to fail at launch? First man-made object to touch the surface of the moon. Who was known as the King of Rockabilly? Ricky Nelson, Carl Perkins, or Eddie Cochran? Carl Perkins. Who was Lester William Pulsfuss better known as? Les Paul, Les Will, or Will Paul? Les Paul. What was the title of Gene Vincent's debut album? Billie Jean Rock, Jeans and Stocks, Blue Jean Bop? Blue Jean Bop. What event occurred for the Luna 2 spacecraft to become the first man-made object to land on the moon? It landed on the moon, it extracted a sample from the moon, or it crashed on the moon? It crashed on the moon. The St. Lawrence Seaway was completed in 1959. What is it? Routes for ships via canals, channels, and locks, a highway crossing huge parts of the ocean, or underwater highways in Norway? Routes for ships via canals, channels, and locks. What did West Germany experience after the forming of the European Economic Community? Dramatic decline of global influence and power, economic neutralization, or exceptional economic growth? Exceptional economic growth. What was Zimbabwe known as during the 1950s? Rhodesia, Alexandria, or Abyssinia? Rhodesia. Which other country, along with Germany, saw massive gains by supplying goods to Europe and the United States during the 50s? China, India, or Japan? Japan. Which NBA team was Chuck Copper drafted by in 1950? Boston Celtics, Los Angeles Lakers, or the Detroit Pistons? Boston Celtics. The breeder reactor was invented in the United States in 1951 to do what? Breed animal eggs without the need of a maternal figure, convert uranium to plutonium, or keep babies safe from the direct environment right after birth? Convert uranium to plutonium. What communications technology saw its debut in the United States in 1958? Feature phones, Wi-Fi, or the computer modem? The computer modem. Which of these Russian spacecraft that passed the moon actually took a photo of the dark side of the moon? Lunik 3, Lunik 2, or Lunik 1? Lunik 3. Who was the mastermind behind the credit card that came to existence in 1950? Ralph Schneider, Herman Hollerith, or Italy's Lombards? Ralph Schneider. England's first nuclear power station began operations in 1956. What was it named? Hartlepool, Calder Hall, or Hinkley Point? Calder Hall. Where was the discovery of solar cells made in 1954? Ireland, United States, or Morocco? United States. Which popular 1950s comic strip by Mort Walker was set on a U.S. Army base? Peanuts, Beetle Bailey, or Dennis the Menace? Beetle Bailey. In the 1950s, your burger and milkshake was brought to your car by someone on roller skates. What were these places called? Roadhouses, Casbahs, or car hops? Car hops. Lorraine Hansberry's 1959 play about the life of an average African American reached Caucasian audiences in a revolutionary way. What was the title of the play called? A Raisin in the Sun, Florence, or Trouble in Mind? A Raisin in the Sun. What were the informal dances usually held in high school gymnasiums featuring rock and roll called? Devil's dances, sock hops, or poppin' locks? Sock hops. What casual shoe with a saddle-shaped panel in the middle was popular during the 50s? Panel shoes, saddle shoes, or cowboy booties? Saddle shoes. What term was used to describe the facetious pastime activity, especially popular among college students, to cram as many people into a telephone booth as possible? Telephone booth stuffing, cramming, or pinky prison? Telephone booth stuffing. What 1933 entertainment invention only became popular in the 1950s? Television, car hops, or drive-in movies? Drive-in movies. Which popular trend emerged among teenage girls, often to brag about having a jock boyfriend in the 1950s? Letterman jackets, blazers, or basketball shorts? Letterman jackets. What food preparation utility was all the rage during the 1950s? Sandwich grillers, Jell-O molds, or air fryers? Jell-O molds. What would one see in many cars hanging from the rear view mirror during the 1950s? An assortment of chains, a small teddy bear, or fuzzy dice? Fuzzy dice. What facial accessory was very popular among men? Septum piercings, tattoos, or sideburns? Sideburns. Which comic that first appeared in 1954 was about a character with an eye patch and appeared on the Bazooka bubblegum wrapper? Billy Bazooka Bang, Bazooka Joe, or Brian Bazooka? Bazooka Joe. The first diet soda was introduced during the 1950s and it was in the form of a sugar-free ginger ale. What was it called? Tab, Pale Ale, or No Cal? No Cal. What were solar cells known as initially during the 1950s? Solar cells, sun cells, or solar batteries? Solar batteries. Which of the following medical advancements were made during the 1950s? Artificial heart, implantable artificial pacemaker, or antibiotics? The pacemaker. Which famous Great Dane met America in 1954 and was created by Brad Anderson? Snoopy, Marmaduke, or Scooby-Doo? Marmaduke. What is the biggest difference between the first ever iteration of a TV remote called Lazy Bones, released in 1950, and the ones we use today? It was enormous, it had fewer buttons, or it had to be plugged into the TV? It had to be plugged into the TV. Who introduced colored kitchen appliances first in the 1950s? General Electric, Whirlpool Corporation, or Electrolux AB? General Electric. What book was published by Truman Capote in 1958? Breakfast at Tiffany's, Lolita, or On the Road? Breakfast at Tiffany's. Which of these plays was probably the most famous play by Tennessee Williams, published in 1955? A Streetcar Named Desire, Sweet Bird of Youth, or Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. How much did the first Barbie doll sell for in 1959? $1.29, $2.29, or $4.99? $1.29. South Africans were forced to carry a second form of ID. Why? Racial identification, criminal history lookup, or family lookup? Racial identification. What car invention was introduced in 1952? The rotary engine, seat belts, or cassette radio? Seat belts. Who discovered an ancient Greek ship in 1952? Jacques Cousteau, Isabella Bird, or Amelia Earhart? Jacques Cousteau. What was the original name of the television show renamed in 1955 to The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show, The Twilight Zone, or The Toast of the Town? The Toast of the Town. Which classic novel by John Steinbeck was published in 1952? East of Eden, The Pearl, or The Grapes of Wrath? East of Eden. What was the most popular car of the 1950s among Americans? The Chevrolet Bel Air, Ford Thunderbird, or Porsche 550 Spider? Chevrolet Bel Air. And bonus question, in terms of inflation, what would $100 be converted from 1950 to 2021? Let us know the answer in the comments. Thanks for playing this quiz. Don't forget to subscribe and please hit that notification bell. Bye-bye.